Hi, this is Amish Agarwal. I'm an advocate practicing in Delhi, and I will talk about. I forgot about what I'll talk about. Um, Let me look it up. Things can get really stressful for an advocate sometimes. Yes, I wanted to talk about one of the reasons why lawyers get a lot of stress when clients set artificial deadlines. I have lost count of the number of times in this year itself that I get calls from clients. They do consultations and they come back after a week or a month or 2 months and then insist that whatever needs to be done by me is to be done immediately and as soon as possible and within the shortest time span possible. And for the longest time, as a young lawyer new into the profession, it was very difficult for me to be able to explain to the client that deadlines do not always work, especially when they are set as artificial deadlines by the client. If there is some specific necessity, if there is a limitation period, there is a limitation factor, or maybe there is some other relief which is required urgently, maybe some evidence is there which can maybe escape, if there is some other difficulty that will be a problem, if there is some immediate threat to life or liberty. Of course, those are situations where the promptness of the lawyer is a must. But there are so many occasions where after waiting for weeks and months, the client comes and says, I need this done within 3 days or 4 days. That is something which I used to earlier have a lot of difficulty dealing with. Nowadays, though, I love it when this happens because I take it up as an opportunity to remind myself that it is the actual urgency of the situation which should dictate the need of the hour. Because as a lawyer, you will have several clients, you will have several cases, and every one which of them will be in a certain priority. For a client to then step into the middle, even though they are paying you money, sometimes even very good money, and for them to expect you to do something at a timeline set by them, you have to first and foremost remember that you do not agree just because you think you want to get that client. You have to explain to the client that the urgency is not really required. Perhaps if the client insists it should be done within 3 days, you have to explain why it will take the 10 or 15 or 20 days if it must. What is the actual possible timeline which is possible? And if you don't know, I would say try to keep it at the longer end of the timeline. Be a little more liberal with the amount of time that you quote rather than doing it in less time, because over promising and then under delivering is the biggest grouse for clients. And if you think that you'll be able to make up with the quality of your work, there have been clients who, when I in the past would promise something to be done in the next, say, 5 days, and if it was not done in 5 days and it took maybe 7 days, I have seen clients leave. So I would rather under promise and over deliver rather than give an unreasonable timeline and then not be able to comply with it. The second thing that you need to do is to explain to the client that the timeline, especially because of the fact that if in this kind of a situation, it happens quite often, the client himself comes after maybe a week or 2 weeks or a month and then ask the work to be done immediately. You need to explain to the client that you have already taken this much time. Now, for me to take up your case at the utmost priority and complete the work within the next 2 to 3 days or 5 days or 6 days is not really possible. If you have the time, why not? Go for it. But a lot of times I struggle with it. With 7 years of practice under my belt, face it. I am sure a lot of you with a few years less than me, a few years more than me of practice will face very, very similar situations. And the third thing is that remembering the level of priority and also the kind of other factors which we talked about earlier, the actual necessity, the actual urgency of the case should not be forgotten. There are, of course, at the end of the day, in law, the thing which matters the most is the periods of limitation under different statutes. There is the Delhi Rent Control Act with very stringent timeline. Is the 138 section 138 of the Negotiable Instruments Act. There is summary cases under the Civil Procedure Code. There is filing of the written statement within specified within the Civil Procedure Code. All of these, of course, are very, very tightly time-bound cases. Apart from these, especially when you are instituting a case, if there is no urgency as such, I would recommend, because this is something that I've struggled with for several years and I thought I'll talk about it, something that I would recommend you to also try and negotiate with the clients. For the lack of a better word, negotiate the timeline as well with the clients. That would be something that has helped me managing expectations as well as get better results for the client, because when I have more time to do the work for the client, I am of course able to get a better result as well.